Look at this number. Japan has one of the lowest rates of childhood behavioral disorders in the developed world. Their classrooms are quiet. Their public spaces are calm. Their children wait in line, clean up after themselves, and move through the world with a consideration for others that most Western parents spend years trying to teach and still can't quite get there. They don't use punishment to get there. In fact, for the first 3 years of a child's life, Japanese parenting philosophy explicitly discourages it. So what are they doing instead, and why does it work so well? Stay with me, because the answer is going to challenge almost everything you've been told about how children learn to behave. In Japan, there is a word for the first 3 years of a child's life. Sansai, 3 years. And in traditional Japanese parenting philosophy, those 3 years carry a meaning that most Western parents have never come across. They are the years of complete indulgence. No punishment, no discipline, no correction, just presence, warmth, and unconditional response. And then those children grow up to be some of the most respectful, self-regulated, considerate people on the planet. That gap between the indulgence and the outcome is what this video is about. Because if you've spent any time watching how children behave in Japan, you've noticed something: the quiet in public spaces, the way children move through train stations and restaurants, the absence of the kind of meltdowns that feel inevitable everywhere else. Something is different, and the answer isn't strict discipline, it isn't fear, it isn't punishment. It's something that starts so early and runs so deep that by the time a Japanese child is old enough to be disciplined in the Western sense, they often don't need to be. Here's what Japanese parents actually do. The first thing is something called amae. It's a Japanese concept with no direct English translation, which is itself telling. The closest you can get is the comfort of knowing someone will catch you. The feeling a child has when they know, without question, that they are safe with someone, that they can lean in fully, that they won't be rejected or pushed away. Psychologist Takeo Doi spent decades on this and concluded that amae is the emotional foundation on which all Japanese social behavior is built. The child who is allowed to fully experience amae in their early years, who is responded to, held, carried, nursed on demand, who sleeps beside their parents and is never made to feel alone, develops an internal sense of security that doesn't need to be maintained from the outside. That security becomes self-regulation, not because the child was trained to regulate, because they were so thoroughly regulated by another person that their nervous system learned what regulation feels like. And then it started doing it on its own. Western parenting research calls this co-regulation leading to self-regulation. Japanese parenting has been doing it for centuries without calling it anything. The second thing is how Japanese parents handle misbehavior, which, in the early years, they largely don't. Not because they ignore it, but because they reframe what misbehavior is. A toddler who grabs something isn't defiant. A child who melts down isn't manipulating. A baby who won't be put down isn't spoiled. These are biological states, not moral failures, and Japanese parenting philosophy treats them that way. When a Japanese child does something that needs redirecting, the most common response isn't punishment or even verbal correction. It's empathy first. What are you feeling? What did you need? Often the behavior dissolves when the feeling underneath it is acknowledged. This isn't permissiveness, it's efficiency. The feeling was the cause, address the cause. This lines up with neuroscience in ways that Japanese parents didn't need a brain scan to discover. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control, decision-making, and social awareness, doesn't finish developing until the mid-20s. Expecting a toddler to simply choose better behavior is expecting a function that literally doesn't exist yet. Japanese parenting works around this by going to the emotional brain rather than demanding from the rational one. The third thing is shuden seikatsu, group life. From a young age, Japanese children are embedded in group environments, preschools, playgroups, community spaces, where the norms of collective behavior are absorbed rather than taught. Children learn not because an adult told them the rules, but because they watched, participated, and felt what it was like to be part of something. The emphasis is on modeling, not instruction. A Japanese parent or teacher is less likely to say do this and more likely to just do it, visibly, repeatedly, and let the child watch and absorb. Research on mirror neurons and observational learning backs this up. Children's brains are remarkably good at learning behavior from watching it, better, in many cases, than from being told. In Japanese preschools, children clean their own classrooms, serve their own lunches, and sort out their own conflicts. Not because adults step back and leave them to fail, but because the environment is set up to make these things possible. The child's competence is assumed and then proven. That assumption, repeated over time, becomes the child's own sense of themselves. The fourth thing is haji, the concept of shame. This sounds alarming to Western ears, but it works differently in Japanese culture than the toxic shame that Western psychology rightly warns against. Japanese children are taught early to think about how their behavior lands on other people. Not just what they want, but what their actions do to the people around them. The question isn't what will happen to me if I do this, but how will this land for everyone else? This social awareness isn't fear, it's an orientation. And it's built slowly through story, through watching, through the repeated experience of being in a community that runs on mutual consideration. The child doesn't behave respectfully because they're scared of consequences. They behave respectfully because they've been surrounded by respectful behavior long enough that it stopped feeling like behavior and started feeling like them. The fifth thing, and maybe the most important, is that Japanese parents don't hide their feelings from their children. A Japanese mother who is hurt by her child's behavior will say so, not with anger, not with punishment. With genuine, expressed feeling, you made me feel sad, I was worried about you, that hurt my heart. This does something that punishment can't. It makes the child visible in the relationship. Their actions have a real effect on a real person they love. That loop, action, consequence, emotional impact on someone who matters lands harder than any external consequence ever could. It builds empathy not by demanding it, but by making it something the child actually feels. The sixth thing runs quietly underneath all of it, the physical environment. Japanese homes and preschools are designed with children's participation in mind. Spaces are tidy, objects have places. Routines are predictable and unhurried. This isn't about aesthetics, it's architecture for the child's nervous system. A child living in a calm, ordered, predictable environment spends less energy managing anxiety and has more left for learning, for connection, for the kind of social watching that drives everything else. When a child can predict what comes next, they feel safe. When they feel safe, the prefrontal cortex can do its developing work. When that development is supported rather than interrupted, the outcomes show up in the quiet of a Japanese train carriage, in the way a 5-year-old bows to a teacher without being told. None of this means Japanese parenting is without problems or that the results are always good. No parenting philosophy is. The same collectivist values that build deep social awareness can create pressure that is genuinely heavy. The expectation of group conformity cuts both ways. Japanese parents live with that tension too, and it's worth saying so honestly. But the core of it, that respect isn't installed through punishment but grown through connection, is something child development research has been arriving at from a completely different direction for decades. Secure attachment leads to self-regulation. Co-regulation comes before independence. Empathy before correction. Assume competence. Model what you want to see. Build an environment the child's nervous system can settle in. Japanese parents didn't read the studies, they just kept doing what worked. And for 3 years they held their children, completely without condition.